Welcome to the Sound Advice podcast. We are Citizens Advice North East Derbyshire. We focus on providing advice for people within the North East Derbyshire and Bolsover district and want to do just that with our podcast. Enjoy!
So hello, and thanks for joining us again to this latest episode of Sound Advice. I'm Ben again, and I'm joined with Alice, Chelsea and Holly, who are our social media volunteers. And we've got Netty as well, who is one of our advisors, and she's also trained recently to be a mental health first aider. So this week we're going to be talking about all things lockdown, perhaps our experiences about what has happened, tips and tricks to help you keep safe and sane during it, and any other things that come up from that. So hope you enjoy, hope it's useful, and I hope we enjoy recording it.
Where could people go to seek help if they are mentally struggling to cope throughout lockdown?
Okay, so I think that's over to me, isn't it?
Very much so.
Oh, there's a wide variety of places they can go to seek help. Certainly, somewhere that's always a great idea to start with is to talk to friends, family, colleagues, because they're the people that know you the most. And they're probably the ones that you feel the most comfortable having those conversations with as well. But on top of that, there is such a gauntlet these days. So there's online, if you don't feel safe about going outside of your home and don't wish to be interacting outside the house, you can go onto apps. There are self-help apps. There are mindful apps. There are books that you can download and look at. There are phone lines you can call. So there's ones for all different kinds of age groups and for different mental health issues that you may wish to raise. And then there are the ones that are quite sort of more generic, like the Samaritans Sane line, the Mind Info line. So there's quite a range of those. If you go to the NHS website, they've actually got an A to Z link of all the different forms of helpline that there are, both for phone lines, self-help, books, external organisations that can come and help people as well. So there's a huge amount of support and help out there that can be gained. And again, there's the people like your mental first aiders as well that you'll find within your workplaces, and your HR should also have some really good connections if you're in the workplace. If you're at college or school, again, there should be people there to help you and point you in the right directions and signpost you to what's going to be the most appropriate and helpful for you.
I think it's worth thinking about. You said you feel most comfortable talking to friends and family, don't you? Because those are the people you share with. Mm-hmm. I think, speaking as a man as well, it's difficult to break down barriers in the first place to make that contact with friends and people that you do know well. It might be harder to talk to those people. What would you say can help overcome those barriers?
I think so. If that's the case, and you certainly don't feel that you want to share those personal details with people that you are connected with on a more regular basis, then look at the options of talking to a helpline and considering talking to a third party instead, because for some people that remoteness is actually easier to deal with than somebody that knows you personally inside and out. And it may be something that you don't feel confident about sharing with other people, and you may not wish them to know at the present time either. So definitely seek that third party help instead. There's your GP as well. You can always go to them. They're really helpful, and they've certainly got a lot of links and options that they can provide you with. And of course the internet, Google to your heart's content, because they've always got lots of support there.
Google with wisdom though, because it's quite a dangerous place, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, no deep dark webs.
So what are some of the healthy habits that we could encourage people to take up during lockdown to help cope?
It's a good point to raise, actually, because one thing that I've noticed personally is that you just tend to lapse into lethargy and not doing much if you allow yourself to. But Netty might have better ideas than I have in terms of that. But I would say make sure you set a routine for yourself. One thing I've tried to do, working from home, is to try and find some sort of separation between work and home life. It's difficult when you're working in your bedroom and you're more or less in the same place most of the day, but to switch your work off at the end of the day rather than keep looking at it. So if you can, put your laptop out of the way, do something that is distinct from what you're doing working, read a book, go out for a walk, get some fresh air. I notice, and you probably notice as well, how different it is when you've been stuck in a stuffy room. Just to get out in the fresh air for a few minutes makes a world of difference to your mood from my own experiences. And do something you enjoy. I mean, I like baking. Netty, I know, has a good line in culinary arts as well. Do you find that you find a release? She's showing us her words. She's got something, not sharing it with us though.
Well, it's very difficult to do so, but yeah, chocolate raspberry brownies, always a must.
You could have posted some to us for being ready.
Or sit through the computer. But no, what Ben says is definitely some really excellent ideas and things that people should do. And I think it's doing something that's right for you and not feeling to be led and pressured by others as well. So, it's all right, all these fitness gurus coming on the TV and via YouTube and everything and go, yay, we should all be bouncing around, and be able to run marathons by the end of COVID. But if that's not your bag, then that's certainly not the way to go. But I think it is. It's looking, I've taken up hobbies that I used to have in the past and looked at new fun things to do. So something really crazy and bizarre that I do is I've started doing line dancing with 3 friends. We can't do it for toffee. It's something really naff and quite chavvy and stuff to do, but we love it. And it's just giving us lots of giggles. So yeah, just connecting up with friends and, if gaming's your thing, anything that sort of just gives you a different change to the norm that you're doing. And for some people that is just sitting quietly in a corner and reading a book. It all depends on what works for you. So I would say don't give yourselves a hard time about what you can and cannot do. Don't feel pressured into doing anything you can't do. But at the same time, certainly kind of be open to some different options. And also, I know it's difficult to keep doing the same old things like talking to friends on links and whatever, but by the end of it, you think, yeah, I'm really glad I did that. It really helped to lift my mood. So what works for you, definitely the best, but certainly look at doing some things and a variety of things as well. So life doesn't seem to be just going down the same old line.
I'd want to pick up on what Ned said as well, that there is a lot of pressure because you see Joe Wicks and his crusade and PE and that's really good, that is getting people motivated. But you also see, that, and you might have felt it yourselves, that everybody's had these expectations on themselves that I will be fit by the time we come out of lockdown. I will be able to make sourdough bread up to the standard that you'd get in a bakery. I'll be able to do a 1,000-piece jigsaw within a day. And you put these unreal expectations on yourself, and then you make yourself feel worse when you fall flat or you don't want to. I think sometimes it's good enough to say, I don't want to do anything today and sit and do nothing, because I hate the word and it's been massively overused. But we're in unprecedented times. No one's been through it before in living memory. So take time to be yourself. Just sit and look at a wall if that's all you feel like doing. I think it's important that you just acknowledge that sometimes doing nothing is helpful. It's restful. It's what you need. But I think it's worth knowing as well not to let that state rule you, that you do need to perhaps sometimes motivate yourself to get out and go. But it's the distinction, isn't it, between knowing when you're in a rut and it's making you worse, and when actually pressuring yourself to do things too much just for the sake of what expectations you've got, what you can put on Instagram to cheer up somebody else rather than doing it for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's about finding that healthy balance, isn't it, of trying to, stay motivated, stay busy, but also giving yourself time to sit down, relax, and just realise that these times are really hard.
Yeah, I mean, have any of you 3 taken up line dancing like Netty says she has?
I haven't taken up line dancing, no.
Can't blame you.
I do find, though, that being on furlough for so long, a lot of people are working from home and perhaps have things to do, whereas I've had nothing to do for months. So for me, being able to find little things to keep me going has been really important. So even for me, having my diary, which has had nothing written in it for months now, just being able to write down things and tick off small things. So it might even be go pick up something from the shop, or I did the washing, or, hoover or clean bathroom, just anything to write down and tick it off makes me feel like I'm doing something with my day, even if it's really minute, and just anything to make me feel like there was some kind of purpose to my day has really helped me personally.
And sometimes you have to record your victories because they're not all banana bread. Sometimes a victory for you, like you say, is going out to the shop.
Yeah.
So I think it's managing your expectations and keeping to your own expectations and not letting other people's dictate your own self-worth, isn't it?
It really is sometimes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anything massive. I feel it can be those small little things just to keep yourself going.
Yeah.
I also think of others as well, because it's really nice, because you may be sort of feeling you're struggling a little. So there's a chance that friends, family, colleagues are in exactly the same place. And just sometimes sending that small text or that small phone call can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel quite good at the end, because you've done something then that's benefited somebody else's life. So it cuts both ways.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I like to do. I'm mindful that we're all working in our little bubbles where we are. So I like to phone Netty and other colleagues. I mean, she's laughing. I don't know how gratefully received the calls are, because one of the recent ones was asking her to come on here. But it is about recognising that everybody's going through their own coronavirus situation, and sometimes it might need checking up. And I always feel better for having to talk to somebody else, because it's broken the day up, and you would be talking to people if you were in an office.
I feel like it's quite important to also bring up June 21st. But everyone's so excited for it, and obviously rightly so after the year we've all had. But I feel like it's important to address how people could maybe cope if things don't open up on June 21st, or if it doesn't all go to plan. I feel like it's quite a shied away topic, because no one wants to seem like the Debbie Downer, but I feel like it is important to address and prepare ourselves just in case it doesn't happen.
Definitely, because I think it's been harder this lockdown, I don't know why, than the previous ones. It's obviously fatigue, it's coming through winter. We're quite fortunate last spring that it was quite a good spring. The weather was kind to us. But I think this time it's the end's perhaps almost been in sight. People are getting fed up now, and that's affected people's mood. And I think you're right. People need to be realistic about these dates. And I know Boris Johnson has said that we're ruled by data, not dates. So I would treat the 21st of June as the best possible scenario. I wouldn't look to it with any sort of hope of a definite return to immediate normality as how we were living this time last year before we went into lockdown. It is a year now, almost. So I would urge caution just to not get hopes up too much. It's not for me to preach about what people ought to be doing to keep safe, but to carry on with the restrictions. But I think, as like you say, there's a risk that hopes are getting high, and then there's a real risk of massive disappointment and risk to mental health if we don't end up coming out of this on the 21st of June.
Yeah, and I think to sort of add to that, it's a case of not feeling guilty when you are disappointed, because you are going to be. We all have been up to now. I'm sure we've all made plans last year that then didn't come to fruition. And it is that thing you sometimes think, oh, I shouldn't be feeling disappointed about this. And there are people far worse off in the world. Be kind to yourself, forgive yourself for that, because you're not a monster for feeling that way.
No.
And we shouldn't be doing this whole self-loathing part about, I'm a bad person. This was something really little, because it matters to you. And I think that's the thing to remember. And it's very hard to still keep remaining optimistic when you replan that holiday again, or meeting those friends, and then again it's the rug gets pulled from beneath. So I would certainly say try making a list of the things that you want to do and make them from small to big, and just being aware that you may need to readjust the dates around them, but make them some of them that will be very achievable to do in that time scale, so they're not all just great big things like holidays, festivals, planning those getaways and things. Make them some nice sort of smaller things as well, so that not everything will end up being cancelled and you've not got everything as a setback then.
And you speak with some authority on that, don't you? Is this the third time that you've had to cancel your holiday plans, Netty?
Yeah, Sicily is on try number 3. Yes, we're now in the end of August. Yeah, the same happened with Bath and various other things that we were sort of planning. It's taken 5 months for a sofa to arrive if it comes in 2 weeks. So yeah, lots of things, and we had little things as well. But yeah, and I must admit, they certainly do upset you in that. And I think that's why it's important as well to keep your support connections going, because I know we all feel like we're moaning half the time to each other and going, oh, this is terrible, that's terrible, but I'm sure that your friends will certainly understand. And then again, there are that we've talked about, all the support networks out there. If you'd rather talk to a more remote person, somebody third party who you feel might be a fresh pair of ears to listen, and they may be able to give you some other ways of dealing with it and looking at it as well.
What did you do to overcome the frustration of your recent... You didn't kick anything, did you, Netty?
No, I think we just resigned ourselves to it in the end, and I think the major thing was making sure that we could rebook it and we didn't lose all the money that we'd sort of ploughed into it.
That's fortunate that you've been able to do that, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and so I'm feeling very positive at the moment, but that's because I'm an annoyingly optimistic person. Just got to come with who I am, so... But yeah, to me it is, I kind of have my day feeling sorry for myself and then think, right, time to sort of see what we can do to make this happen still, to keep that sort of something to look forward to going, I guess, as well.
It's a really positive outlook, isn't it? Positive way of looking at things.
What would you say are some of the best coping strategies for during the lockdown?
With regards to sort of being able to deal with the lockdown and how it makes you feel and everything.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people have been experiencing loneliness, so how can we try and prevent that?
Yeah, Yes, certainly. There are a lot of places that people can go to online and that to engage in things to do with loneliness for various different organisations. So I'll tell you about a couple of them. There is, for the sort of more the older generation, there's a free helpline called the Silver Line, and that's open every day and night. And there are staff there to offer information, friendship and advice, as well as linking callers to local groups and services. So that's really nice. And they have a weekly friendship call as well. There's a thing called Re-Engage, which helps the older people reconnect with their communities through regular meetings. So that's a nice lifeline for friendship. There's to help sort of improve your mental health, the Mind Info Line offers callers confidential advice. So they're really good to call about that. There's a thing called The Mix, which offers support for anyone aged 13 to 25 who's got any kind of challenge going on. So that's specifically aimed at sort of the younger age group. There's also...
Are they national, Netty?
They are indeed, yeah, all of them are. They've got like 0808 numbers or 0800 numbers, majority of them. And then for making friends, if you're really, suffering with loneliness and that would, be a really important input into your life, there's things like Meetup Mondays, which help to strengthen communities by free weekly meetups. And then when we're back out to, we can meet again face to face. They do coffee mornings and meetings in pubs and things like that. There's also one called Next Door, which offers a social network for local communities. So you can speak to your neighbours online and then look forward to meeting them in the future. There's one for people who just love singing, and that again is done online or face to face when they can. And then there's lots of volunteering opportunities as well if people want to do something to give back to their communities. So the Cinnamon Trust has a network of 15,000 volunteers that help with pets. And then you've got things like Do It, which provides a huge directory of volunteering opportunities, again from walkers for dogs to counsellors at hospice, and you can search by area on that one as well. So there's quite a lot of good stuff out there to help people.
We're fortunate in an organisation is that this volunteering opportunity for you three has come up during lockdown. So you've all joined us during, I wouldn't say because of it, but do you think the opportunity is there where it wasn't because of the lockdown?
Yeah, I think it's definitely helped. I mean, I know that you started doing remote
advice.
Yeah, and then that allowed for you to take on people from not just within Derbyshire, but all around the UK. Because I wouldn't have been able to join if it wasn't remote. So, and it's been really beneficial, I've found, just because it's given me something to do throughout the lockdown. I don't think I wasn't volunteering with you during the first one. I think I joined just before the second one. I think.
Yeah, September time.
Yeah, I could tell the difference between having nothing to do in the first one and having something to dedicate my time to in the second and the third ones. So I found it's been really beneficial.
Oh, good.
I found it's been really useful as well, because I think it will help me in my personal development, but it also gives me the chance to give something back. And I think the podcasts are a really good idea as well, because there are a lot of topics that I'm very interested in, and I think a lot of people our age will be as well. So I think it's good to be able to educate others on things that I'd wish I'd known myself.
This again is something that we have been able to do because we've had the time, we've had you as volunteers who have been able to flesh these ideas out for us. So we've benefited, and hopefully, as you both said, you've got something out of it as well. So yeah, volunteering. If you can find a cause that you want to volunteer with, have a look at that, certainly, because these days location is not necessarily a barrier to that. It might be down to your willingness. But I would repeat, in terms of a response to what you were asking, Ollie, what we said initially. I mean, in terms of how to get through it, try and set, without too many expectations on yourself, but set a list of what you want to do through a day or a week, just so that you've got that to work towards. But then be easy on yourself if you don't, for whatever reason, because things come up, moods change. But it's important, I found over the last few weeks as well, just to get outside for the fresh air, because I sit with my back to the window looking at this computer screen. We're not turning around talking to colleagues like we would. We don't wander off to make a drink, so you don't realise until you stand up. I've set, that's my age as well now, but but there's that as well. So I think it's taking time away from a screen, because we sit in front of them for too long. Just get out, and a change of scenery makes all the world of difference.
Yeah, definitely. I found that going for walks daily, or wherever possible really, has definitely helped. I mean, I don't think I walked as much last year as I have this year. That's probably because I've had more time to, but it has really helped me stay positive and, given me a reason, not to sound too dark, but to get up in the morning, I suppose, to give me something to do.
And as the restrictions ease a bit, you can join up with more people. I know you can walk with 2 people at the the moment, one other person, should I say, but you can find somebody else, a friend, to go out and walk with just for the company as well, can't you?
Yeah.
I think having the short-term goals like that really boost your mood, especially for me. I meet up with my friend either every Thursday or Friday to go for a walk, and I find it really helps me get through the week, knowing that I have something to look forward to, going on a nice long walk with my friend and a chat. It might only be for a couple of hours, but it's just something to look forward to, and it's something that you know is doable at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's that thing again that we said, into setting reasonable expectations for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I've only come to the realisation in the last few weeks, part of that has been actually writing down on my calendar what task I will be doing for what times a day, rather than taking a scattergun approach and just doing whatever, because the motivation isn't there then. I mean, things crop up inevitably and we have to respond to them. But in work, I have recently set aside time for different roles that I have to do in my job. So you can adapt that as well to your personal life or to your own work life to make things easier, pass the time, and put in time to step away from your computer, walk around the house and have a look out a different window, see what the neighbours are up to.
I'm not sure if that's legal, Ben.
Casually looking out of the window is fine,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure.
I feel like that all leads quite nicely on to sort of addressing how people could maybe cope, addressing to life after lockdown, because I know we've all had to make adjustments during lockdown to cope, but I think it's going to be quite a big adjustment to go back to normality, I suppose.
It's a concern I have that I don't want to become a recluse, but there is a certain amount of anxiety about how safe is it going to be outside, what we're going to do, and I think at the moment it's very much unknown, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely take it at your pace again, not at somebody else's. And if you can have that, sort of understanding with work or anything, it needs to be appreciated that this has been, like you say, it's been a year now virtually. It's going to be a huge change for people and a shock. And in a way, we've all kind of adjusted this more sort of introverted life, haven't we?
Yeah.
For some people, it'll be an easy adjustment again, I think. And for others, it's going to be a huge step and quite scary and intimidating. So I think wherever possible, again, it's do what you need to do rather than feeling the pressures of others to do what they want you to do, and take that time. And if you have setbacks along the way, again, don't beat yourself up for them. Be kind to yourself and just say, well, I had to go through all of this, and look at what changes you made in the last 12 months. And, you probably achieved so much more than you ever really realised, and just keep reminding yourself of that.
What would you say for someone who's going back to work in quite a busy environment, like those who going back to the 21st of June, those who work in retail, those who work in hospitality are going to go from being alone the majority of the time to having to deal with a mass amount of people, most likely. And especially after Eat Out to Help Out, I feel like a lot of people might be quite worried and anxious about going back to that quite fast-paced, busy environment, and it might get overwhelming while they're working. How should they cope with that?
Yeah, most definitely. And like you say, I think it's already been reported, hasn't it, that the people are stacking up to get back out to eat meals and go to the pub and everything. And so those places, like you say, are certainly going to be very overwhelmed to start with. And yes, it is going to be a case of a bit of a baptism of fire, I think, because employers are just going to expect you to slot back in and do straight away. So it may be in those circumstances that getting the support you want from your employment might be not as receptive as from some other areas. So then I think it's certainly looking to other third parties. Again, so realising the fact that I think the first thing is the realisation that, you're not alone, that you are struggling to cope with this, and then finding the appropriate help for you. And that could be, again, going to see your GP, phoning some helpline, talking to family and friends, because yes, it's going to be hard. And I do agree, I'm not sure that all employers are going to be hugely receptive to you saying, oh, well, I'd like to come back on a more sort of gentle basis. It is going to be straight back into the fire. But again, if it is that it does start to cause you problems, then, and you do feel you've got an employee you can talk to, then just make them aware this is causing you some difficulties. Again, I realise that's not always possible either. And probably just, and then I know it's not the most ideal thing, but using some of your time out. And if you do need to have a break because of your mental health, then, you're as entitled to have that time off as sick leave as you are for a physical condition. condition as well. So don't ever feel that you can't do that. And I know it's still very difficult for people because it does come with a stigma. Physical health doesn't. But yeah, because otherwise you'll crash and burn, and then it's going to be a worse case scenario than the one you probably imagined. So yeah, as much self-care as you can do, tapping into the support that you need.
I think it is important that you do raise your concerns with your employer, because they do have an obligation to make reasonable adaptations. They have a duty of care to those people that they employ. And reasonable adaptations depend on the circumstances, obviously, of the employment, also of the issues that the employee is facing. So it might be, if we look at a visible disability in terms of someone who is a wheelchair user, an adaptation might be the height of desks that people work at. For someone with a mental health condition, it might be changing patterns of work. I was reading some tips that it could include allowing different start times so that commuters are on different buses and trains, so there are fewer people about, so they're missing the biggest rush. That might help you in terms of staying physically safe from catching what remains of the virus, and also helping any anxiety that you've got about being in big crowds. So yeah, certainly talk to your employer, because if you make that request for adaptations, they do have to consider them, and it's always worth seeing. Like Netty said, it depends on the flexibility of an employer, but then you go down the route of, was the employer's response appropriate? Should they have taken more consideration? And you might want to look at what your employment rights are, but certainly discuss that with them, because they have that duty of care to you as their employee as well. And the furlough scheme is continuing until September at the moment, so there is always the option that your employer could choose to keep employees on furlough until they felt able to return. But I think, as we've said before, that is an employer's discretion rather than an absolute rule as to what they have to do with that.
Which groups do you think have been the worst affected by the lockdown?
Your age, definitely. Younger people, in terms of the impact that it's had economically and what it probably will do going forward. Not looking at, obviously, the health effects of people who've had the virus, but in terms of the economic impact that it's had, it's people aged under 30. We've seen a big increase in younger people coming to us with various sorts of inquiries because they've had issues with their employers, because they've had loss of jobs, loss of income, and they find themselves in a situation that they've never been in before. And a lot of older people as well, who have been in work for a long time, have been made redundant. But I think it's the younger people who are going to suffer in the long term because of the instability that we're going to face for a few years to come from it.
And I think probably the most vulnerable in society as well have suffered greatly, because they have been asked to, sort of isolate for pretty much the whole year, and they've not even been given that little bit of freedom outside. So I think for them mentally, it's been a very tough time as well.
Just going on from that, actually, I must admit, I'm about to graduate in May this year. It's slightly terrifying to think that I'm going to have to find a job after this. And what advice would you give to people who are in a similar position, and how to remain positive and things surrounding that?
It is difficult because what I was about to say before you said remaining positive was a bit doom and gloom. And I think unfortunately the situation is probably going to get worse when the furlough scheme ends, because that's been artificially propping up a lot of businesses, I think, up to now, who have managed to keep people in employment because they've had the financial support from the government to do it, and who might, when that has gone, before they've had a time to pick up trade again, not be able to continue financially. I think it will just unfortunately be a watch and wait situation. I think it might just be a case of applying for anything that comes to get a foot on the ladder. I can't offer any positive outcome. I can't think specifically of, I think it's like we've said with all of it, maintain a realistic outlook of to what you want to achieve. I'm not saying at all that you shouldn't be entitled to the best job that you can. I'm saying there will obviously be a lot of competition because people have been let go from jobs that they'd got. So as well as the new graduates flooding the market, you've got people who have been made unemployed during the last year who are also in the same situation, equally well trained, equally intelligent and deserving of the employment, and all fighting for an increasingly limited number of jobs. But that's not the positive outlook that you said, is it? So sorry.
I think from my own experience, having graduated for you and being around other graduates who are also finding it hard to find employment, even before the lockdown, I think it's really important to, again, apply for anything and anything. Like, everything that you think, it might not look relevant, but just think of it as in terms of this is something you can add to your CV. It is experience you gain. It's not just experience skills-wise. this, but it shows that you can, if you get a job, say just basic entry level office job, it shows that you can work in that environment. And doing things on the side, like I was being teaching myself how to use Adobe. It's just little things on the side that show you're a bit more proactive and enthusiastic. And just remember, just because this is where you are now, it doesn't mean that's where you're going to be maybe next year, 5 years time. And these jobs that you have when you come out of university, they don't have any say or any reflection of your worth.
Exactly.
So you really need to remember, just because it's tough now, the job you get doesn't reflect who you are as a person, and it doesn't reflect on your worth, and you shouldn't let it get you down.
That's a good point, Alice.
And definitely think out the box a bit as well. I mean, the one huge positive you've all got on your side is your age and your youth and your energy and your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And your, I want of a better way of putting it, your lack of responsibilities. So you're not tied to a house and all those kind of things and bills. So think of all the other things that you might like to do, or the opportunity to probably go and work overseas or volunteer overseas for somewhere where you get your basics sort of provided, like food, accommodation and things, and just look at doing something that can just totally give you new experiences, expand your mind, your experiences, and think they would be really valid on your CV to show that you've taken that what was quite a poor negative and been able to do something really positive with it that enriches your life at the same time and gives you some amazing memories for the future. That would be sort of something I would think of.
That's exactly right, and to treat this as an opportunity. I mean, I graduated just after the 2008 financial crash, a couple of years after that, and things were picking up. But what has been said this time is that the bounce back is expected to be much quicker than that one. So if anything else, the economists are thinking that this isn't going to be as long-lasting, as hard-hitting as that downturn. So that, as has been said, you can look and you can improve your own chance of employability. You can do things to add to your skills. You can go and travel if you felt like going and travelling, and you can just enjoy your time being young without, as Netty says, those added responsibilities. And as Alice really said and made the really valid point, it doesn't reflect anything at all on you as a person. It's circumstances beyond anyone's control, and it's just having to go with the flow, accept what comes, and just go what you want. Hopefully I've made that a bit more positive than I started off with. But you all did the hard work with that. I come with the doom and gloom and someone else can cheer you all up.
What specifically, in terms of financial support, is there available during lockdown for people?
Well, obviously, we've touched on it briefly, but the furlough scheme is still going until at least September 2022, where the government provides 80% of wages so that employers are helped to keep people in employment. The problem, as well, as we've said with that, is that it's not mandatory for employers to put staff on the furlough scheme, so they might decide that you have to go into work and do the job. A lot of that would come down to what your employer thinks is reasonable, what the job you do entails and how reasonable it is, and how able you are to do work from the business, whether you need to be there, whether you should be there, whether it's an essential business. But that is a source of support. If you are unable to work because of shielding or because of illness, there's obviously statutory sick pay, employment support allowance, new style employment support allowance, which is available to people as an income support. Or it also might need considering whether you make a claim for means tested benefits such as universal credit, just to give you the top up in income if you've had the reduction. So if you're on furlough or you've lost your job, have a look at whether you're entitled to claim any benefits to top that up. And there's no shame in doing that. The benefit system is there to support you during these hard times. The government recognise that. They've increased and agreed to continue for at least 6 months the payments of universal credit. So the £20 top up is continuing. So if you're not sure, check, get in touch with the local Citizens Advice, find an online benefits calculator. There's one on Turn to Us, and have a look to see whether you're entitled to make a claim for anything, because the support is there for you. So claim it. But if you're self-employed as well, the new grants have been announced for the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, which are supposed to catch more people than the previous ones. So if you worked or traded in the 2019-20 and 2020-21 tax year, so the tax year that's ending in April, and if you submitted your tax return for the 2019-20 year before the 2nd of March, you could be entitled to that support grant, which equates to average trading profits of 80% for the last 3 months, or to a maximum of £7,500. So that's supposedly catching about 60,000 unemployed people that weren't entitled to the previous grants. But it's worth checking. If you're not sure at all, check, get advice. Don't sit and think it doesn't apply to me. Come and ask, because the amount of clients, and as Netty would probably attest herself, we get people say, no, I didn't think I'd be entitled, but people very often are.
And then they've also got the fact that they can speak to their utility providers and things and ask them if they can take some breaks or reduce the payments. And then you've got food banks to help people if they can't financially afford to purchase food. So they can talk to a lot of their providers actually and explain their circumstances and see what they can do to just reduce payments or stop them for a short amount of time whilst they sort of get back into a more established pay sector again.
Absolutely, and that's what we discussed with the debt podcast that we did last time, that prevention is always better than cure. So if you're not sure how your income situation is going to go, if you're concerned, check in on whether or not you're entitled to any extra income. Check whether or not you can change to a better utility rate. Any subscriptions that you've got that you're not using, get rid of them if it's an expenditure that you've either forgotten about or you don't want anymore. Because I'm guilty of it in the past. I've had things that I've subscribed to, forgotten about, and they've carried on until my debit card's changed, and they've only stopped because I've not updated the details. But in times when you are looking at what your expenditure is, that says a lot about the state of my financial management. But when you are looking at what you can afford to come in and go out, those are the sorts of things that, unlike me, you need to get having a look at. But we can talk about that with you. It's what we do day in, day out. We check those sorts of things with you and give you that advice. So come and talk to us.
And just for people who might be concerned about contracting the virus or worried about getting it whilst at work, is there anything that your employer is obligated to do? I think you might have touched on this briefly, but...
It all depends on what work you're doing and, again, what is reasonable. So the advice is still to work from home where possible. Obviously, it's not always possible. The people who work in retail, in service industries, you've seen in supermarkets, they've all put perspex screens up to protect people working at tills and things like that. So those are the sorts of adaptations that employers have to make, because, as I said before, employers do have a duty of care to the people that they are employing as well as to the public. But it's not as straightforward as saying this is something that everyone must do who employs people. Yes, they should make sure that people keep socially distanced where possible, wear masks. It's not mandatory in every form of work, though. Signs reminding you to wash your hands, keep your distance, and things like that are mandatory. But for some jobs, it might not be possible to do that. So it all comes down to what is reasonable for the work that you're doing and what the employer can reasonably be expected to do. But if you're at all uncertain, if you think that your working environment's not safe for you, you can ask for those adaptations to be made. As I said, it could come down to changing your pattern of working so there are fewer people in your workplace, so that you travel in a time when there are fewer people. It could be that you stay working at home for a longer period. So if you do office work and your employer wants everyone to go back, you could say, well, I've done the work from home, I can continue to work from home. I would feel happier and safer doing that, and your employer would have to consider that as well. So it's worth asking for any adaptations to your working practices to be considered, as well as the physical barriers that people are putting up and things like that.
Okay, that's really useful for people to know.
I mean, I'll ask Netty because she works on the front line, but have you come across many cases where employers are or aren't? Have you seen any good or bad practice from clients?
I don't think we've heard much about sort of good or bad practice. I think sometimes people have definitely had concerns with regards to existing health conditions they have, and they've felt the pressure to go back. And so, we've perhaps sort of have a conversation with them around the fact that, if you have got an existing health condition, you're going to be very vulnerable going into that workplace. Having the conversation that Ben sort of just mentioned, I think it's been more a case of some of the employers trying to sort of do things a little underhanded, more than whether or not they've sort of been helpful in sort of adapting to people's needs. And I think it's more that we get the calls about. And yes, there are definitely people that have called who've said, I'm scared, I don't want to go back to work, what can I do? Yeah. For various reasons, really. And all those reasons are very valid and certainly shouldn't be dismissed out of hand because it's something that somebody else wouldn't find an issue or a problem. Again, it's very much about how you feel about it and how it makes your experience of it as gauged.
What I would say is, if you're a member of a union, talk to a union rep if you think there is something, because there is always more strength in numbers. So if you've got a union rep who can stand and say to an employer, this is not acceptable, you need to do this, or to make things better for people, you should do that. You've got greater bargaining power with that. So talk to union reps, talk to your employers. If there's nothing that can be done legitimately, there is still the furlough scheme, so ask your employer to furlough you for a bit longer. until it is safe for you to return to work. If the worst comes to the worst and they won't do that, you could look at claiming, as I said, the SSP if you've got a health issue, or you could ask to take annual leave to cover a period if you've got enough annual leave to cover an absence. And then the bottom line would be looking at unpaid leave, because everyone's entitled to take unpaid leave. The length of time is what's reasonable, which again has got a very elastic meaning. So at the moment it might be reasonable to take quite a long time off as unpaid leave because it's not necessarily safe for you to go back. But then you can look at claiming the come top up benefits that we've talked about as well. But with any of that, I would always say get advice from us, from a law centre, from a union, from ACAS. Thank you again for listening. I would like to thank Netty for joining us, because it has been up and down. We've had highs and lows, obviously, with my pessimistic lows, but you brought us back with more optimistic outlooks, and hopefully we've not left you feeling too down about what's going to happen in future. But I think the message overall is that there is hope for things to come. There are ways of coping and managing through what's been undoubtedly a very trying 12 months. So thank you, Netty. Thank you, Holly, Chelsea and Alice for joining us. And if you've got any other thoughts, you can email us at soundadvice@nedcab.org.uk. Until next time, goodbye.